TitleMatchNetwork.com.
In the locker room, I didn't see any drugs. I seen a couple of, you just turn your head a couple of times, but I remember one guy, I'll never mention names, on an off cycle, he was taking 8 cc's every other day on an off cycle. He was trying to get up to 350 pounds, and he was probably about 315, 320. But other than that, no.
What are your thoughts on steroids?
Back in my day, all I ever took was a Deca. Because the amount of traveling that we did, you couldn't eat right, you couldn't hit the gym right. And that's the only drug I did. And I took 1 cc every 10 to 12 days just to maintain the look that I had.
Right.
And back then you had to have, if you had a look, you had to keep that look, and you had to do whatever it took. And my thing was Deca. I would take a little bit of Deca every 10, 12 days, 1 cc. And that was it. When I got to WWF, the drugs were around there a lot.
Right.
That whole story, and I don't know if I should mention.
You can.
That whole story with Hogan and Vince
Right.
and all that, it was true. Vince had his doctor in there, and he'd prescribe you any drug you wanted. And Vince knew it. And that's why I don't understand why he keeps taking Hogan back. Every time they try to open up a new territory, Hogan runs back to Vince. Oh, Vince. To me, that was the worst territory I ever worked.
I'm going to ask you about that. I guess when you were told that you're going to work the Tower of Doom match, what was your initial thoughts?
Oh, I couldn't even tell you. I was too far back.
What are your memories of the match itself? Do you remember the match?
No.
Do you remember? Was it 3 kids?
Yeah.
Kevin Sullivan was Rob.
Oh, that wasn't too bad. As far as fear of it, no, it was no big deal. I didn't even know who won that match.
I don't remember either. It was
Jimmy Garvin got crushed. And she was in the final cage.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't a hard match to work anyway, Ones I didn't really care for, the ones that you see on your show, the ECW.
How did you wind up going to Titan, to the WWF?
My wife sent in the tape. They required a tape. And I remember at the time I was still with WCW. I was starting to leave them and go into Florida. My wife sent a tape in, and they called me up. I got home. I was home 4 days a month.
Right.
And Vince had his secretary, somebody call up and send me a ticket and everything, and I went up. And that's how I started. As far as territory-wise, I'm funny about it. Vince had his own group, and it didn't matter to me if you didn't have a spot for somebody. You should have left them alone. Because I was always, not always, but I'd been on top, and I was staying on top. I had done my jobs and everything, and I didn't have a problem when I got there. Vince and his right-hand man and left-hand man act like they didn't know who I was. So I had no big deal. George Napolitano printed one time in one of his magazines that Perez going to the WWF, will he be able to take the games that they play?
Were you excited about going there, or was it just another company?
No. I didn't really want to go over there. But my wife said, it's about time you go. So I did. I went. I'll tell you how that ended. If you want to get into that real quick.
Yeah, you can talk about that.
I think I've been there 3 months at the time. Never did her TV. One of Vince's right-hand men came up to me, married to a man. And he's Patterson. He was sitting at the end of an 8-foot table up against the wall. And I remember I never played games. I'm there for my business. Well, Pat Patterson pulls me aside and says, come here, let's talk, French Canadian. Let's talk. So he's sitting up against the wall, an 8-foot table this way, and I got my leg propped up on the table, and he says, it's so good to have you here. You're going to make a lot of money. We'll give you a new gimmick, the Latin Heartthrob. There's too many of those here. We'll do this. We'll put you on our TV. You'll be a big superstar. The build-up, man, about a 5-minute build-up. Then he tells me, besides, I hear you go both ways. I said I never play games. I told him, F no. I kicked the table over. He went tumbling down. No, no, no. I'm talking bad guy, good guy. What'd you think I meant? About 3 weeks after that, Vince comes up to me and says, you know, Al, I know you're having a hard time. I said, no, I'm not having a hard time. He said, nobody knows who you are. I said, Vince, nobody knows who I am. Every time I walk out to the ring, even in New York, they're hollering, Latin Heartthrob, where's Gary Hart? And Kerry Von Erich's going to kick your ass. But nobody knows who I am. He said, well, it's different in the New York crowd. I said, so for the New York crowd, Al Perez, Latin Heartthrob's a piece of shit, right? He goes, no, no, no. I said, I must be. He said, well, if you want to put it that way, yeah, but when we get you on the TV, you'll be all right. I said, okay. The next day, he pulls me aside and says, Al, we're looking for somebody who's over, good enough to make the Ultimate Warrior look good. I said, me? They said, yeah, you'd be perfect. I said, yesterday I was a piece of shit to the WWF crowd. Today, I'm over enough good to make them look good? He said, yeah. I said, you got the wrong guy. I said, I'll do my job if I have to. A job is a job. But you're not going to take me into a territory and just smash me because I'm not going to play Pat Patterson's game. I was at a hotel with about 8 guys, waiting to check in. No names mentioned. One guy's at the counter, and the lady asked him, one bed or two? He said, two. And from behind me, Pat Patterson said, one bed'll be fine. And the guy said, one bed.
Wow.
So I didn't belong in that territory.
Top guy? Was this top guy? Or?
Yeah.
Good.
When you first got into the World Wrestling Federation, did Vince make any promises at all? And like, what were your initial impressions?
Vince, that was the only time Vince ever talked to me.
Wow.
Was when he pretty much called me a piece of crap.
So you had no idea like what they're going to do with you? Just went
No.
there, hoping to do best.
That's what I'm saying. If he didn't have a spot for me, they should have just left me home. Vince wanted to tie up every piece of talent he could, because that's limiting his competition.
Right. How different was the locker room from WCW's locker room?
You talk about egos, you talk about chaos, you talk about people not getting along. That's the place.
What did you see?
What I see there, everybody's waiting for somebody to fall so they can take their spot. And pretty much everybody there is doing what they have to do to take a spot. I've seen people pretty much want to push somebody down the stairs just to have that spot open. And that's how it was. Vince, I don't think Vince ever promised anybody anything that I know of.
Right.
But if you weren't his boy, you weren't going to get anything. He had his view, and that was it.
So it was very cliquish too at the time.
Very.
TitleMatchNetwork.com